Hi, Seth David here, and I want to talk about how to document your information for your bookkeeper or your accountant, because we're just about at the end of tax season here, which means that a lot of us have now gone through the trauma of having to get our books together, many of us at the last minute, and wanting to be able to provide somebody with the documentation that they need, somebody like me, so that we can put your books together, so that you can then turn a nice, good, clean set of books over to your CPA, so that your CPA hopefully has very few questions to be asked about the books and how things are categorized, so you can get your tax return filed timely and quickly. And one of the areas, the easy thing is the checks, because it's pretty simple. We write checks and I can get copies of the checks, and what can I do? I can get copies of the checks from almost any bank online, and if your bank doesn't provide you with copies of the checks you've written online, I strongly urge you to switch banks at this point, because this day and age there's no reason under the sun why they shouldn't be able to provide you with that. So the checks are easy. I can get copies of the checks, and easily enough I can put that part of your books together in terms of what you've paid for, whether it's an expense, whether you purchased an asset, whether you've repaid a loan, or whether you've established a loan to someone else. That's easy to figure out. The hard part tends to be the deposit side, which is substantially the income side, because it's harder to get that information. B of A is now providing copies of what you've deposited, but that's only recent. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to do what I do. And the reason you want to do what I do is because I've been doing this for a long time, and I know what I'm doing, and I know what I need to see when I go in to see a client. So I know what you need to put together for me before I come in to see you in order to make my life easier. And the easier you make my life, the less it costs you, because I don't have to spend as much time hunting and gathering information to put it together to complete your set of books. And what I'm talking about here is we receive money in, generally speaking, one of two forms. Either I receive a check from somebody, or it comes into my bank account electronically, such as when I process credit cards. So let's talk about checks first. Cash is a different story, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But checks are the hard one, because I don't get copies of it from the bank, and there's no electronic processing out there that I can go to in order to verify what makes up that deposit that came into my bank account. So what I want to do is as follows. In QuickBooks, I have the ability to print what's called a deposit summary. Now this is different than a deposit slip. You may be printing those pre-printed deposit slips, which enable you to go to the bank and hand your checks to the teller along with a pre-printed deposit slip, so you don't have to handwrite each check and check number and so on and so forth. And that's great. But in addition, I want you to print the deposit summary. And it's going to look a little something like this. I'm not going to get too close with it because I don't want you to see who my clients are. But it's a deposit summary and a summary. That's good. It's a deposit summary, and I'm going to show you in a minute on my QuickBooks screen how to print that. And what that does is it lists each client whose check I've received in that deposit, how much the check was, what the check number was, and what it totals to. That way I know if the total on here is $2,000, then I know I'm going to get my bank statement in a month from now, and I'm going to see on the same day, or maybe a day later, a deposit for the same total. So I know exactly what makes up that deposit. Isn't that exciting? Now, the next thing I want you to do is I want you to make copies of your checks. Now I have the vouchers here, but ideally what I'd like is the copies of the checks. And the reason why is because that confirms for me exactly which checks made up this deposit total. And now I have a complete set of documents that shows me exactly what makes up the money that went into the bank. So there can be no question in my mind, or anyone else's, about where that money came from, how I got that money. No, it wasn't from selling drugs. It was because I provided a product or service to a client and they wrote me a check to pay for it. And there were several clients who wrote me checks to pay for what I sold them, and now I'm depositing them into the bank together in one big fat lump sum. So, that's important. The next thing, when I go to the bank and make the deposit, I'm going to get a receipt. Now B of A is great because they give you these receipts with imprints of the checks that I've deposited. So that makes it real easy. Almost makes you think, well, now I don't have to copy the checks, do I? Yes, you do. And the reason you do is because they obscure certain aspects of the documents here for security reasons. And I want to be able to see everything. I want it all because I'm greedy. So what I do is I take my deposit summary, I take my copies of my checks, and I take the receipt I got from the bank confirming that the deposit made it there, and I put it in, and I'll paper clip it, and it goes in my inbox. Now here's how you print that deposit summary I'm talking about. This is very exciting, so pay careful attention. This is like high action accounting on film. Not really film. My recorder records directly to a desk. So I'm going to choose banking over here, and I'm going to go make deposits. See, QuickBooks makes it really hard to figure out what you're going to do. And then I can make this a full size so you can see better, so you can see more better. And next to the print button, if I click that little drop down arrow, I get choices. That's what I love about QuickBooks. We have choices. I go down and I choose deposit summary. And when I choose deposit summary, it's going to give me the print dialog, and it's going to prompt me to print, and it's going to print for me this wonderful deposit summary, which is going to tell me again who I got paid from, what their check number was, how much they paid me, and what it totaled to. So again, I choose deposit summary. It gives me this dialog. Most cases for us, it'll default to the right printer. Now, if you want to save money or save paper, then what you can do is you can print this to a PDF. And if you don't have a PDF printer application, or converter right in there, what you can do instead is you can go to efax.com, you can download their software, and then you can print anything to eFax, and then eFax gives you a nice little button that you can convert to it, so you can convert anything to a PDF. Anything you can print, you can then convert to a PDF. It's sort of the poor man's way of having a PDF document converter. But it works, and it works well. And then if you want, go set up your eFax account, and you can fax things electronically. It's so much fun. Now let's talk about credit cards. Credit cards are a little more complicated. What happens with credit cards is it funds electronically, and I have different providers. What I have is, what do I have? I have Visa and MasterCard that fund together. I have American Express that fund together. But they fund separately from one another. And then I have Discover, and then I think some people still actually use Diners Club out there, but we're not going to talk about that today. So what I want to do is every single day, if I have a terminal, I want to make sure I batch it out. I want to make sure I print out that batch total report, and I want to print out all the individual slips for cards I've charged that day, and I want to keep them together. I want to put them in an envelope and say, here are today's Visa and MasterCard transactions. Then separately, I want to do the same thing for American Express. Now, if I have online processing, what I want to do is I want to go into my back end, into my website, or my CyberSource account, or whoever I'm using to process credit cards, and I want to go in and I want to run a report and show myself, here's these days Visa and MasterCard transactions, and save it as a PDF, don't waste paper, and save that somewhere in a folder under a file name that says April 14th Visa MasterCard processing. And then I can do it again for American Express. So that's how I want to handle the credit card processing. And that's my little bit of instruction for today. When you keep this kind of documentation on hand, it makes your own life a lot easier, because if you ever have to go look something up, the information is right there at your fingertips. But more importantly, maybe not more importantly, but I think more importantly, you get somebody like me in there to come and clean up your books and get your bookkeeping records together. It makes my life so much easier, which means it's going to cost you a lot less money, because it's going to take me a lot less time to put your books together. I don't have to do all this hunting and gathering to figure out who paid you what and when. And again, that's the harder part. The easy part is the checks. I can record a bunch of checks, or I can download it from your online banking, and I can even put them in a suspense account, and then I can list them for you, and you can go to your check register or go online, and you can mark for each one who was paid and what they were paid for, and then you send that report back to me, and in 5 minutes I can have your expenses or asset purchases or whatever those checks represent all cleaned up. And it makes it so much easier. It makes everybody's life a lot simpler. And then your CPA is going to love you, and they're going to love me, because we're going to be able to give them a nice clean set of books that's going to be easy for them to use to file a tax return. Have a great day, and I hope you're getting your taxes filed on time tomorrow.